How's it going, people? Welcome back to the channel. Over the weekend I did a Q&A and I asked you guys on Instagram what you wanted to hear from me. So I gave a whole bunch of answers, but one question that kept on coming up is how do I buy my cars so cheap? So I bought my Skoda Fabia estate for £400, my VW Polo for £400 and my Mazda MX-5 NA for £1,000. And a bunch of people were like, how in the world did you get 3 cars for £1,800? So I thought I'd walk you through my process of buying those 3 cars, including both the luck element as well as the tactics and skill, I guess, element into buying those cars. And then alongside that, I'll give you a few key things that you can do whenever you're searching or buying a car or whatever it is to make sure that you get your price as low as you can. Anyway, if you enjoyed the video, do hit the like button. It really helps the video out and makes me know what I'm supposed to make for you guys. Remember to comment and subscribe for more wiki car content, but without further ado, let's get into the video. Apologies in advance to any long-term subscribers who might have heard some of these stories before. I'm going to try my best to do as little repetition as possible, but there may be some overlap with previous videos. The Skoda Fabia estate, which I bought back in February 2014, I bought through eBay. I was on the hunt for a first car, and what was important was that I didn't actually have a specific car that I wanted. I just wanted a car that was going to be cheap on insurance and was going to get me from A to B. If it was a cool car, great. If it wasn't, not the end of the world. So I'll comment this a bit later, but what was important was the fact that I needed to get that cheap insurance. So any car that I found on the internet, I also then had to do a quote on it to make sure that despite the price being low, I was also going to get a low insurance quote as well. What happened was I scoured through eBay for an extended period of time, like honestly about 3 or 4 weeks. My friends were so bored of me at school because they would hear me saying like, oh, I'm looking at this car, I think I might get it. Oh no, I'm looking at that car, I might get it. Oh, and then this car, and then they would just be like, Johnny, just buy a car. Like, what are you doing? But fortune favours those who are patient when it comes to buying a car, and this perfect green Skoda Fabia estate came up online in Hull, so quite a long way from my home, but it was only up for like 250, maybe 300 quid. And that was despite the car only having something like 46,000 miles on the clock, so really, really cheap for the mileage on the car. It was a bit battered and bruised, and it was about 50 shades of green, but it was very cheap. So I called the owner of the car and said, hi, how come the car's up for so cheap? Like, the MOT history looks okay, the history of the car looks okay, why is it going for basically this kind of money? The person who owned the car was actually a builder who had taken the car as part payment for a job that he did. So the person who needed to pay for the job didn't have the money, so they gave him the car. The amount that he was owed was around about £400, so he was hoping to get around about that for the car. I said to him, I'll give you 400 quid, I'll take the car. All good. I also wanted to talk to him about the fact that on the actual advert, he said that the car needed to be collected within 3 days of the purchase. Now, I couldn't do that because it was miles away from my house and I had to send my dad to go and collect it, and he was only able to do it at the weekend. So that meant that I had to wait a good 5 days for the car to be collected. So I had to ask the guy, hi, like, yes, I got the £400, I can pay you for that and I can buy the car, but I don't want to mess you around. We won't be able to get the car within 3 days. We have to get it within 5 days. And I feel like that really helped him to trust me because he knew that I was actually interested in buying the car. I was setting up a time for when I would like to actually come and collect the car. He thought, okay, this person's a bit more serious. So yes, that was the Skoda. Let's move on to the Polo. Obviously, I had the crash in the Skoda, as I've told you a million times, and then I needed a car very quickly this time to go to university. It was about 2 weeks between the time when my Skoda crashed and where I needed to be at university. Might have even been less than that, might have been about a week. Now, in these cases, it can be very difficult to buy a car online because you have to see it online, then you might want to go see it in person, and then you might have to talk about the sort of prices and discuss and negotiate, all that kind of stuff. It takes a long time. Instead, we had to use the resources that were much closer to us. That means like dealerships and stuff like that. So how do you get a nice cheap car from a dealership? But I'm fortunate enough that my dad knows a lot of dealers around the area, so he went and spoke to one of them in particular and asked them, are there any cars here that you've taken maybe as part exchange or that just aren't selling because people aren't interested in them, that we can take off your hands and then give you some more space in your lot? From this, he was able to get a short list of cars. There was only actually 2 or 3 cars that we were interested in. One of them was a Renault Megane and then the Polo as well. Obviously, in terms of insurance, the Polo was the cheapest, so that's the one that we went for, and it was also the cheapest one overall at £400. The dealer just wanted to get rid of it at this point because it was just sitting on his lot, taking up space for a car that could have otherwise actually made him some money. This one was just sitting there not getting sold. And then finally we come on to the Mazda MX-5, which I walked you through last year, but let me give you a little bit more context into how I bought it. So after putting out my Instagram poll and asking you guys what car I should buy, I went for the MX-5 and I started scouring eBay and Auto Trader and Gumtree and all these different sites trying to work out where I could get the best deal on a Mazda MX-5 Mark 1. I was going through car histories, I was looking at all of the different common problems with MX-5 to see if anything were popping up in the descriptions, basically everything I could possibly do to learn about the MX-5 and find a whole bunch of cars that could potentially be worth buying. This took me about 2 weeks of just solid looking at cars every day, like what MX-5s are available, what could I buy, yada yada yada. But nothing was exactly where I wanted it to be. I knew I had a budget. I didn't want to spend more than around about £1,500. At best, I'd like to actually be paying £1,000 for the car. And then one day I saw this green Mazda MX-5 pop up on eBay. Now it was within budget, it was £1,250, but when I looked at the MOT history, I saw that it had some rust issues near the seatbelt mounting points. However, the owner also said and showed the fact that the car had actually had rust repair in that area. So that was a big positive for me. And also on top of that, I had a whole bunch of prerequisites that I wanted out of the MX-5, and one of those was the hardtop roof. I wanted that to come with the car. But because of the MOT history, looking at the rust and looking at a few of the other parts of the car as well that weren't in perfect order, I was able to say, look, £1,250 is a bit sketchy. I could put that £250 towards some rust repair or towards some other parts to make sure that the car's running and driving well. What was key about this as well is that in the advert, it actually said that the car needed to be off of his driveway as soon as possible because he had another car and he wasn't able to fit both the cars in the spaces. That meant that he had a real urgency to actually get rid of the car, and so he was happy to take £1,000 for the MX-5. Also, the fact that I knew a whole bunch about the car meant that he knew he couldn't really keep pushing me higher on price because I was going to be able to say, well, no, it's not worth that. And in terms of a running and driving MX-5, I think I did pretty good. So this is a quick rundown of how I managed to get all three of those cars for less than £1,800 in total. What I wanted to do now was take you through some key factors for success when it comes to buying a second-hand car, the ways that you go about getting a car that's cheaper rather than spending too much on your car. The first one, and what I would say is almost most important, is finding someone who has an actual motive to sell the car. And obviously anyone who's selling a car will have some form of motive, but what I mean is that they really have a push factor making them sell that car. Maybe they've got a new car like the guy with the MX-5 did and they haven't got space on their driveway anymore. Maybe they've had a change in circumstances in terms of maybe they've moved job, or they have moved country even, or they have had a child, or whatever it is that's getting in the way of them keeping that car, it's worth going for. On the country one in particular, you can get some really good deals because if people are planning on moving country for work and they just want to get rid of as much stuff as possible and they're sort of fire sailing stuff out of their house with their car included, some amazing deals are very much available. As I said before, maybe it's a dealer and they've got it stuck on their lot, so they've got maybe a lot that can fit 100 cars in it and they're at max capacity at this moment and they really want to get rid of that car. One way of working out as well is that if you spend an extended period of time looking at what a dealer has on their lot and seeing what doesn't sell, you can come to them and say, well, you've got that listed for 600, like I'm not interested in 600, can I give you 450? And then sort of work from there. If someone isn't really that interested in selling their cars, they're just putting them up online to kind of test the waters, they're thinking about getting a new car, they're not 110%, it's not a good opportunity to go in and start negotiating. Something that you shouldn't do when it comes to buying a car if you want to make sure that you spend a good amount of money is do not fall in love with a car over the internet. I have been there. I very nearly bought a completely broken BMW Z3 at one point in time because I just fell in love with the idea of having this car and driving it around Europe in summer and basically having this like perfect little roadster to go driving in. And yes, it was quite cheap. I think in the end it sold for like £1,500 or whatever. But what a waste of money that would have been. £1,500 on a non-working Z3. I spent £1,000 on a fully working MX-5. And the only reason I was even in a bidding war to try and get that Z3 was because I decided that was it. That was the one. I even named the car in my head. I was like, that car is going to be called Betsy. We're going to drive Europe. We're going to have the sickest time. I'm going to love that car to bits. And I completely threw all logic out the window. All reason just went. And instead I just wanted to buy the car. Don't let that happen. That's a huge mistake to make. You will spend too much money if you do that. This is something that should come as no surprise to anyone who watches the channel, but you should do your research. I research so many cars every single week for the top 5-star videos or just for videos more generally. If you want to buy a car, you should know about the car. When I say do your research, I mean in a general and a singular sense. So you should know the general facts about the car in terms of the common problems, the reliability, anything related to the car more generally, you should know about it. And then in terms of the car that you're specifically looking at, you can find the MOT history. If you've got the number plate, you can also find out if the car's been crashed before, if it's been in any kind of sort of insurance categorization. Then when you go in to actually buy the car, you should show that you are now an expert in it. Talk to them about that time where it failed an MOT and be like, why did it fail that MOT? What was up with the car at that point in time? Talk to them about the fact that you know about the gearbox failures on these cars that happen quite often. Has the gearbox been changed? Have they had any problems with the gearbox? Can you drive the car and test drive it to feel whether the gearbox has any crunches, etc.? All that kind of stuff all comes from your research that you wouldn't otherwise know. This should be a simple one, but for those of you who are buying online, make sure you use the correct site to get cheap cars. So in the UK at least, you've got a whole bunch of different websites that you can buy from, including eBay, Auto Trader, Gumtree, which is actually, I think, part of eBay as well. You've got Piston Heads, you've got Car and Classic, you've got all sorts of different websites you can go on and buy cars. Now, from my experience over the last 2 to 3 years of making YouTube videos, the one thing that has been quite clear is that eBay offers the best prices. Gumtree is quite good as well, but on eBay you can bid for cars, and often people put them up without a reserve because they think that the car might just bring enough interest in and of itself, and that's not always the case. If I had tried to buy exactly the same Skoda Fabia estate on Auto Trader, I bet you at the time I would have had to have spent minimum £1,000. The only benefit is that Auto Trader does some of the actual background research for you, which makes life a bit easier, like tells you whether the car's been categorized and all that kind of stuff. One thing that people should be doing but don't always do is speak to the owner before you buy the car. In all 3 cases of me buying a car, we spoke to the owner before we did any purchasing. With the Skoda, we asked if we could collect the car after the 3-day period, if the car was in okay shape, and also why the guy was selling the car. With the Polo, we spoke to the dealer and asked why the car had been sitting in the lot for so long. And with the MX-5, I spoke to the owner and said, look, I'm not willing to pay £1,250, but I will give you £1,000 for it, and these are my reasons why. By actually speaking to an owner over the phone, you build trust that you wouldn't otherwise have with them. You don't just end up being this random person arriving and maybe potentially being a tire kicker. You make their life slightly easier. If you can make an owner's life easier and less risky, then you're probably more likely to get a better price on your car. But the final point that I wanted to mention is that whenever you are buying any car, just take your time. Just really give it time, do the research, do everything that I've said in this video, and that sometimes takes longer than you want it to. With the Polo, I could have probably got a better car and a better deal if I had been able to spend longer on it, but I had a limited amount of time. If you have time to buy a car, it's really in your favor to use it. You can get really excited about buying a car and be like, oh my gosh, I just want to buy it and I'm gassed and yada yada. Just slow it down. Do the research, make sure that you're being intelligent about your purchasing decisions. Anyway, I hope this video helped you out. If it did, please do leave a like, as it really helps the video out. Massive thank you as always to the patrons for their continued support. Remember to comment and subscribe, as well as follow me on Instagram at CarsWithJB, because if you didn't get involved in that Q&A the weekend, I think I answered like, what, 100+ questions. So yeah, you guys need to go get over there. But as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.